Hello, I am Eddie O'Sullivan, and this is This Week in the Italian Campaign. The Italian Campaign, brought to you by the Freedom for Italy Network. Episode 65, The Allied Armies in Italy in January 1945. After almost 18 months fighting and an advance which began on Sicily's southern coast, Allied armies in January 1945 were poised to complete the defeat of Axis forces in Italy. But the cost had been high. Since the landings on the Italian mainland in September 1943, the 5th and 8th Armies had suffered more than 250,000 casualties. At the start of 1945, the Allies had almost 1 million men and some women from more than a dozen nations in Italy. The 8th Army, commanded by Richard McCreery, comprised more than 600,000 individuals. The 5th Army, commanded by Lucian Truscott, had a total strength of 330,000. Many were involved in occupation duties and maintaining the supply chain connecting Italy's ports with the front line. The Italian Co-Belligerent Army, which was founded in November 1943 with the creation of the first Motorised Grouping, had been steadily expanded and was to rise to a strength of 326,000 in the first half of 1945. The Mediterranean Allied Air Force had 12,482 aircraft in theatre during the Italian campaign, carrying out long-range bombing raids, attacks on Axis shipping, and close air support for ground operations. Despite intensifying pressure in northwest Europe and on the Eastern Front, Germany nevertheless remained determined to hold northern Italy, the only major manufacturing area outside the Third Reich still in German control. The German and Italian forces in Italy at the start of 1945 comprised 21 divisions, though they were up to 40% under strength. On the west of the Italian peninsula, Germany's 14th Army, opposite 5th Army's 4 Corps on the left and 2 Corps in the centre, comprised the 1st Parachute Corps and the 14th Panzer Corps. In the centre, 2 Corps also faced the 51st Mountain Corps of the German 10th Army. The 76th Panzer Corps opposed the 8th Army. The fascist Ligurian Army, commanded by Marshal Rodolfo Graziani, comprised the 5th Mountain Division and 157 Reserve Mountain Division. The Ligurian Army was spread along the Ligurian coast around Genoa and in the mountains on the French frontier. The key strong point in the German line was Bologna. The area around the city had been transformed into one of the most formidable barriers created in Italy and was behind 3 belts of defences to block any Allied advance from the east. These were the Irmgard line, which ran along the Senio River, the Laura line on the Saturno River, and the Paola line on the Silaro River. Machine gun posts, rifle pits, and anti-tank gun positions had been dug into river banks. The defensive system comprised mutually supporting strong points. Large dugouts in the hillsides accommodated most of the defenders, who could be deployed when an attack was mounted. In the first week of January, to take advantage of a frost that made the ground hard enough for armour, 8th Army Commander Richard McCreery ordered an advance by Canada's 5th Armoured Division in the 1st Canadian Corps sector to capture the south shore of Lake Comacchio and the base of the spit between the lake and the Adriatic. The Canadians also cleared German southeast of Bagnacavallo and advanced to the Senio opposite Granarolo, while the 56th Division in 5 Corps converged on the town from the left, using kangaroos. These were Sherman tanks that had been transformed into armoured personnel carriers by removing their turrets. Offensive operations were brought to a halt across Italy. Allied commanders turned their energies towards the spring, when a coordinated attack could be launched. Italian Supreme Commander Mark Clark noted in his diary on the 19th of January 1945 that my plan is to leave the 8th Army in the Po less two divisions, the 6th South African and the 8th Indian, which the 5th Army now has. I require 8th Army to take over Monte Grande using an Italian group in order that the 5 US infantry divisions, which will be rested and at full strength by the time of the attack, may be employed offensively in depth to break through to Bologna west of Route 65. I also have a British Corps, the 10th, when it returns from Greece, to conduct the activities of the 8th Indian and 6th South African and Brazilian divisions along Route 64 so as to facilitate the advance of the US II Corps and protect its west flank, which will be more and more extended as II Corps advances, and to provide a possible reserve to rush to the west coast should a threat develop there. The heavily defended mountains intervening between the present II Corps front and Bologna are great handicaps, but we have fought in the mountains in the past. This will tend to extend the enemy. We will then make the final wallop with US divisions. McCreery's plan for employment of his army in the Po Valley I concur in heartily. I have great faith in the use of Lake Camacho and the thrust by the Canadians towards Ferrara. Moving an American corps into the Po Valley, which I seriously consider, would require the movement of American supplies almost immediately over precipitous mountains, and these movements would soon be discovered. The enemy, who is operating on interior lines, would mass his means to stop us in the Po. In this coming battle, I have a superiority in infantry of about 1.5 to 1. This is totally inadequate in this mountainous terrain. My artillery superiority will be about 2 to 1. Air and tanks overwhelming. That is why I must wait until suitable weather prevails so that these overwhelming superiorities may be taken advantage of. The key to this situation is to make a series of feints, get the Boche off balance, and when he has finally committed his reserves, to strike the blow. This is what I propose to do. Well, that takes us up to the middle of January, and you can see that the offensive operations in Italy have now basically been suspended, although there will be activity in February, and I will deal with that in future episodes. The main attention at this point in the Second World War was focusing on the Allied operations in France as they approached the Rhine Valley, and in the Eastern Front, where the Red Army was advancing rapidly and approaching the German frontier. But the Italian campaign was to come back as a major front in April, and of course I will be dealing with that in future episodes. This year is the 80th anniversary of the end of the war in Europe and the end of the war of the Second World War. So there's going to be a growing amount of activity focusing on these anniversaries across the world. And we were doing our bit to make sure Italy's part in this story is told properly. So there will be many things happening that I will keep you posted about in due course. But one of the most striking things is that I will be leading the Monte Cassino to Rome Peace Walk, which will arrive in the Italian capital on the 30th of April this year. We'll be walking from Monte Cassino, and there'll be a delegation of British and Americans and Canadians who will be making that pilgrimage. And the 30th of April, when we arrive, will be ahead of the 80th anniversary of the end of the war in Italy on the 2nd of May 1945. People don't know, but the fact is that the war in Europe ended. It started to end in Italy. Italy was the first place where peace came, and that was followed by the end of the war in Europe on the 8th and 9th of May. And then, of course, in August and September, with the end of the war in the Far East. So these are dramatic stories, and I will keep you posted about all the activity that we will be undertaking in the months to come. So I hope you will follow us and perhaps join us in what we are doing. So that's it for today. We'll be back soon with another episode. So until then, from everybody here in This Week in the Italian Campaign, it's goodbye, good luck, and may God bless you all.